So, Allison, when is the first time you heard the words hypertrophic cardiomyopathy?
Such a good question. I think I was about 13 years old when it was spoken to me, and the
What?
doctor was telling me it was something I had.
Wow. So you were diagnosed at 13.
I was.
Ah,
Yes.
I was 12, you were 13. We've lived a life, my dear. We've lived a life. So, this is Tales from the Heart, a podcast from the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association, and this is Patient Edition. And today we're speaking with Alison Conklin, who I'm happy to say I've known for a great many years now. And she's got an amazing story of resilience and loss and gain and creativity that I wanted to share with our HCM community. Alison, welcome to Tales from the Heart.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. I love you so much, so it's an honor.
It's an honor for us to have you here because, girlfriend, you've done some things and you've got a following, and you're this world famous photographer who's living her best life, but it didn't start out so smoothly. So let's start by talking about your mom a little bit and what happened to mom and her diagnosis.
Yeah. So my mom was amazing. She was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I think it was like IHSS. Do you remember those days?
Yeah,
Whatever.
I remember those days.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually what I was diagnosed with, right? And she was diagnosed, had one of the very first like septomyectomies back in like the late 70s for her
Mhm.
hospital where she was. She was going to college to be a chemist, but then after all of that, she stopped and was able, so my parents had me, I'm an only child, and was sort of sick on and off my entire like 13 years with her. And one day, the two of us were just hanging out in the kitchen. It was my first day as a page in the library. It was a summer job. Spoiler alert, I don't know or ever understood the Dewey Decimal System. And I apologize to anyone ever looking for a library book at that said library in which I was starting my first job that day. Um, but the two of us were hanging out in the morning before I had to go to work, and suddenly she just looked at me and she was like, "I don't feel well." And I was like, well, "What do you mean?" And then she just collapsed, and fell against the counters and fell on the floor. And I remember I had just taken a babysitting class at the hospital and did my most, like, the best attempt of CPR, right? You learn it, but you can never know how you're going to be able to fare with it when you're trying it in real life. But I, you know, remember sitting there like trying and begging her to wake up. I had to call 911 and had to call my dad. Um, and yeah, I mean, obviously she didn't make it. She ended up dying that day. And I think there's lots of hard parts, but I remember coming home from the hospital, just my dad and I, suddenly just the two of us, not the three of us, and having to like she was in the middle of cooking, so it was like putting away all the food that she had made, and, like, knowing it would be, like, the last piece of bread that I would eat that she made, or, like, you know,
Mm.
all of those things, and it's just I remember I had only been diagnosed 5 months prior to her death, and I remember when my cardiologist her cardiologist, said to me after my echo the reason they had gotten me there is I had passed out in the middle of a competitive floor hockey game in, gym class, and he was like, "Your heart is just like your mom's." And I had no idea what that meant. But there I was as a teenager.
What year are we in?
We're in '94. So, I had just been diagnosed with HCM and just watched my mother die literally in front of me. Um, she was 42 when she passed away. And so in my head, I had always assumed that I would also die at 42. Um, yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. Spoiler, I'm
Wow.
44.
Still here.
Still
Past
here.
that number. My grandfather was also 42 when he had his cardiac arrest and died. It's kind of there are certain numbers that stick with our families, and we assume like when I was 12, I was diagnosed and knew my grandfather died at 42, which sounded so old.
Right.
at 56, it sounds so young, so it's
Right.
all about perspective. So
Mhm.
here you are, a 13-year-old girl, 1994. Um, I hadn't started the HCMA yet.
Mhm.
My sister was still alive. So here I am living a parallel life in New Jersey, and you're in Pennsylvania.
Right.
So after mom passes, your dad introduced you to a hobby.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about that creative outlet.
Right. So, I mean, this is, as I said, 94. So this is before social media. So my dad was like, hey, can you put together a memorial wall for your mom's service? And basically handed me a big old box of photos. They were hobbyist photographers, both chemists. My dad was had a doctorate in chemistry and was a working chemist. My mom obviously was interested in that. So that science of developing photos was something that they were passionate about and would turn any like little apartment bathroom into a dark room. Well, my family is a big Sicilian family, and they had all come in out of town for the funeral, and I remember just being really overwhelmed. I'm still obviously in shock. There's a lot I'm working through, and my dad gave me this box, and I remember going through these images, and they were like black and white contact sheets and like all of these candid, amazing photos that like I'd never seen before that really showed me who my mom was. Like,
Hmm.
beyond the portrait of Owen Mills or Sears, it was sort of this like window into who she was because it was like her in her kitchen cooking because she loved to cook. And it was her laughing or with her eyes closed mid whatever. Like it was just this beautiful record of who she was. And I realized how powerful photography was. And I suddenly fell in love with it. And my dad, he was suddenly a father of, a single father of a teenage daughter. And so I would beg him to teach me how to develop film because he had all the darkroom stuff. And so he did. And, what was really beautiful about that is I learned to, take photographs and develop photographs from negatives that my parents had. And I was developing like by hand all of these beautiful portraits of my mom, and like my dad and I would be in the dark room and we'd watch like her face come up in the fixer, and like
Oh,
it was very healing. And I think that's just I fell in love with it, and I've been a photographer ever since.
wow. Wow. There's so much there. There's so much pain. There's so much beauty and a purpose. A
Mhm,
purpose. Because you had that experience, you know the value of family photos. You know the
mhm,
value of somebody being able to look back on their lost loved ones in that image. And
right.
it's more than just a picture. That picture says was 1,000 words or whatever, but these are our lives encapsulated on a piece of paper at these moments that my favorite photos are candids.
Mhm,
I'm not the pose things. I'm always uncomfortable myself posing for picture. I'm like, should I smile? How do I smile? I don't know. I
right.
love candid shots. And some of my favorite pictures of my sister, who I lost at 36 to HCM, there's so much in those candid photos. They're not perfect. Technically, they're probably really not perfect, but I love those candid shots.
Right.
Just love them.
And that's yeah, I mean that's what photography is all about. Like what does it make you feel when you look at it? And I think, that sort of drove my career from that point, to be able to capture people in a way, and maybe they don't realize it because they haven't experienced, but everybody goes through something, right? Or many things.
We all go through a lot. No,
Yeah.
life is complicated, messy, and dirty, and nobody gets out of here alive. And
This is true.
my goal is to die on my 94th birthday, laughing, blowing out candles. This is how I hope to leave, in a non-dramatic way. So, and hopefully somebody will take some photos.
Right.
So you're 12, you take up photography, you're 13. I was 12, you're 13. And you take on that photography project as a teen and adolescent, and then you turn it into a career. But simultaneously, you're managing your HCM,
Mhm,
and you watched your mom die.
mhm.
And they said your heart was like your mom's.
Right.
What did you do to manage your HCM, from like 13 to your mid 20s?
I mean, I think what was interesting is in that time period, and again, I think things have obviously changed. They pulled me out of all sports. So I was very athletic at the time of my diagnosis. And um my claim to fame is I was on the all-star team in basketball in high school, but
Woohoo!
obviously, like, yeah, it all got pulled. I couldn't do any of that. So it was sort of this I didn't know what to do. I was terrified, to be honest, because, like, I just watched my mom die just in the middle of cooking food, and
Mhm.
so they were like, "Don't go up any steps, don't be crazy," so I was scared. There was a lot of fear, but then I would follow the rules of take the medications and go in for all the appointments and also try not to make it my personality the best way that I could, that game. And I just sort of lived my life. And I think that that was the best coping mechanism I could have had. And I also think that's how it crept up on me so quickly that I was suddenly at a point where they were like, yeah, you need a transplant. I'm skipping ahead many years, but I mean, they eventually came out with I had an ICD implanted in 2000, and which was only 6 years after she passed. It just wasn't really readily available at the
Right.
time. It wasn't offered to her, and that saved my life many times. The exact same experience that I had with my mom happened to me and my son. I was taking him to go get his braces on, and we were walking into the orthodontist office, and I passed out. Didn't even have a warning, and I you know, went into VF, and my device had to bring me back. Yeah, and my son had to see it all and start screaming I mean, worst case scenario, because I know exactly what he's going through, except that I'm still in this moment alive. But he was younger than I was, and it was, I mean, that
Mm.
was hard. It's still hard when I think about it. But that device went on to save me many times throughout the story of my original heart, and how grateful I am for technology, because otherwise I would have died in my early 30s. Um, I had a septomectomy, and I think that's when you and I we started chatting,
Yeah.
because I was terrified.
Yes.
I
And
was
we
terrified.
put you through our intake and navigation system. Back then, I was doing both sides of it, I believe. And we got you ready for your myectomy, which you went to
Mhm.
Tufts.
Mhm,
Yeah.
exactly.
Back
Yeah.
in like mid 2000s.
2018.
28. Wow. Really?
Yeah. So I had Marty when he was,
Wow.
yeah. So
You
he
went from,
obviously didn't.
so your myectomy was 2018.
Yep.
Brought you a little bit of relief, but your heart decided,
Totally.
like, I'm out. I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah, they basically did the myectomy, and I did not feel any better. And it was funny because I had, like, run into somebody, and he happened to see my scar, and he's like, "I have one of those." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" And he told me, and it was the exact same thing. He had a septomectomy, and he's like, "I'm running marathons. I'm running 5K. Like, I'm all over the place." And I was like, "Wait, why does he feel so good?" And it ended up that my septomectomy left me, like, pacemaker dependent. So they had to go in and put a third wire in, and my heart was, like, never beating properly. And so I had the septomectomy in February, and then in November they went in and put another wire, and the pacing sort of helped for a while, and then it didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
CRT devices and end stage HCM, they give you a little bit of time, but it's just not great. It's just
yeah.
not great. So then we had another conversation,
Mhm.
and you're like, they said the T word, and I don't know that I'm really there yet. And maybe I am there, and maybe I'm not. And I think almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody with HCM who goes to transplant, you're like, but I've learned how to navigate this heart,
Right,
and I'm here, and I'm breathing, and I'm
right.
upright. So do I really need to take somebody else's heart?
Yeah, I was so scared. I was so because I just had no idea what my life because if you look at the movies, right? Because unless you know somebody, transplant's not something that you are knowledgeable to. Right?
Correct.
And you're knowledgeable if you're watching like ER and TV shows, and those people come out looking great with no wires attached. Like, and now you look back and like, that's so inaccurate. But like, I was still doing things. I think I just didn't realize, it got to the point where like for the heart failure and myself, it was tying my shoe was an Olympic sport, putting on my bra was nearly impossible, like little things. And you just don't realize over the days, the months, the years, how hard everything was. Um,
And
and yeah.
you ended up going from your HCM program at Morristown to get referred to NYU, which is where I now follow for my transplant as well.
Yep.
So we get to, have the same team that drives us nuts and we drive them nuts because that's what we do in transplant. It's a special relationship with your transplant team.
Yep.
And I remember you being admitted, and then they're like, hey, maybe we're going to send you home. Maybe we're going to keep you. And you're like, what the hell is going on? It's really weird at the end when that timing thing is complicated. So let's just take a minute for our fellow HCM transplant warriors to come. Tell us what was going through your mind as you were heading to that moment of here's a heart for you.
Right. I mean, so basically they said to me, listen, you have about 6 months to live without a heart transplant, and you better start listing. And I didn't believe them for a second. And it's funny because I love Dr. Martinez, and he laughs at me every time. I was like, I can't possibly believe this is true, but I will do everything you're saying to me. I'm very like, I'll do what you're telling me to do. I'll do all the tests. But then my dog died of DCM. And I know this sounds really weird because Dr. Martinez will be like, I was telling you were going to die, but it wasn't until your dog died that you were like, okay, all right. But it was a whole thing. And they were like, okay, well, you're almost done. And you just did this, they checked all the pressures and they were like, okay, you need to be listed. You need to be listed and you need to wait in the hospital. Like, you're sick enough, your status too. And so I got into the hospital and they finished and they did one. And I sat around for a couple of days while they were like doing other things. And then they tested the pressures and like, they actually look really good. And I had already blown up my entire like life, canceled all of my fall weddings, winter weddings. And we're like, we're going to send you home, put you at status 4. And I was like, wait, hold on. How can I have like been like by death's door
2 days ago, 3 days ago, and now I'm okay?
Now I'm okay. And I remember fighting for myself, like and really advocating and saying like, hold on, like, how can you go from this to that so fast? And then I had this amazing doctor who was like, let me just take a breath and let me know. Cause I was like, you guys just tested my pressures after 2 days of me sitting on this bed doing absolutely nothing. Like, that's not my real life. I'm in my 40s. I'm running around. I have kids. I have a career. Um, and then they kept me for a couple of days, put me through some tests, and were like, right. And then when they finally finished listing, it was a 3-day wait. I was still back at status 2 with exception. Like, you have path the way for us all. And I got the call, which was, I remember I was walking the halls because I was trying to stay active because they were like, you need to stay as active and as strong as you can before, because the fight to get back to that is hard. And they weren't kidding. And the doctor came in and was like, hey, can I walk you back to your room? Can we have a talk? Didn't in a million years think that he was going to say, hey, we found a match. Yeah.
Let's talk about that moment for a second for those who may someday have that experience. And for those who will never know that experience, it is the most surreal moments of my life when my phone rang at 12:30 at night on Groundhog's Day. Hello. I'm like, my first thought was, please don't let it be like the movie. I only want to do this once.
Right.
Just knowing that in a few hours, you're going to get this gift. It's not 100% guaranteed that you're waking up.
Right.
Or who you'll be when you wake up.
Right.
What was the moment for you?
I mean, so the doctor told me that. I called my husband and my kids, and they all came into New York. We, hugged one last time. And I remember the team was keeping me so like, this is going to be so great. Like, everybody was hyping me. And then it wasn't until literally I got rolled into, I was still like fine. I had been through tons of surgeries. I was still fine getting rolled into the OR. And then I remember the anesthesiologist, who was amazing, was chatting with me. And then suddenly, like, he got busy and I was just sitting there, like laying there, right? I'm sure you can relate to this, looking at everyone. And I'm like, wait, hold on. This isn't like a normal surgery. I started to freak out and then I was done. They had put me under. I was like, like, thank goodness. So it really wasn't until I didn't think it was real. Cause even when I woke up, right, I had the breathing tube and everything, but I was still like, did it happen? Because they kind of do prep you and say like, we could get you in there, we could put you under and something could throw it awry. Yeah. So it's very surreal. I remember just finding out that there was a match and being devastated for the donor family because I know he was a gentleman, and then I have 2 sons, so I was like, "This is somebody's Jonas, this is somebody's Moses," and just being like, um, so sad. I mean, there's just it's the most complicated emotional experience I will ever have, I think, is transplant because there's just it's 2 things can be true at the same time. You can be absolutely so excited about the possibilities of having this beautiful chance and this healthy life, and also you can be completely devastated for how you got there, for your own life and for the other families. And it just I think that's I've learned that 2 things can be true at the same time.
That's very, very well said. And as a donor family and as a
Mhm.
recipient, I've literally walked both sides of the equation.
Right.
And the one thing that I can tell recipients is that as a donor family, in that moment of darkness, my sister was 36. She died of cardiac arrest. So obviously, they weren't taking her heart, they took her kidneys and her liver to give to others. There was this teensy tiny speck of light in an otherwise black, depressing, horrible space. But there's this little light saying, somebody else is going to benefit
Yeah.
because my sister gave a gift. And there's hope in that moment. And I've held on to that hope since 1995. And for some reason, even when we signed off on my sister becoming a donor, that day, June 15th was when we signed the papers, 1995. I looked at my family and said, remember how this feels? I know we're going to be on the other side of this equation someday. And all those years later, in 2017, there I was getting the gift that somebody else had to have that other moment for. And I have such respect for my donor family, although I only know Brandy's name. I don't know anybody. Her sister's Mandy. Mandy, if you're out there, honey, call me. Love to meet you someday. But maybe I won't. And it's knowing that there's a family in pain, so sad.
Right.
But being able to live my best life and live all of my bonus days with a smile,
Mhm.
even when they're hard days, is beautiful. So I just dropped the name Bonus Day,
Yeah.
which I absolutely love that. So
Thank
tell
you.
us what you've done since your heart transplant there, Allison.
I know. So thanks. I remember going through the first year and like wishing so many things, wishing for like first of all, when I had they told me, "Hey, you need a heart transplant." I sat through an intake meeting and it was so terrifying. And I remember wishing that I had something that I could relate to. And I've worked in photography and magazines my entire life. And last January, the idea was proposed, like, what if we did a transplant magazine that featured stories? Because I wanted to see people that had this experience and then went on to live their lives in a beautiful way. Because there's definitely, I mean, there are hard days. I am not just like, I'm not saying that there's not. I'm not trying to say it's rainbows, but I'm just trying to say, like, you and I shouldn't even be here to have this conversation right now.
Absolutely.
And like, I go through each one of my days thinking, like, everybody I meet, I shouldn't be meeting because I shouldn't be here. And I don't know their story, but like, how can I make their lives better? Right? Life in general. I mean, just look at us for receiving a gift of an organ. It's about what we can do to bless other people. And I think whenever I'm in my low moments, I'm like, we all have our moments like, I just need something to keep my head up. It's like, what if you reverse that and say, what can I do to help somebody else's day? And maybe that's simply just mailing them a card to say, hey, so great to talk to you. I'm so glad to have you as a friend. That little thing makes me feel just as good as hopefully they're going to feel receiving it. I'm digressing, but like basically I just started a magazine. And I gathered some people that I knew for the first issue and I had them either write their story or I wrote their story and kind of put some fun things together and printed it and did it with like, I'm a nobody in this world, but I was like, I have to believe that other people would want to read it. And with an Instagram for bonus days and just sort of talking about it online, I was able to see that there were people loving it and the responses I got back were amazing. This was the first issue
Yes.
with Carolyn on the cover. And it, total, like it's printed. I don't know about you, but when you're in the hospital, I doom scroll and I'm just staring at everyone else's like highlight rolls. And I'm like, I'm just sitting in this room, not sure if I'm going to get able to like walk out of here and what that's going to look like. And I wanted, to create something that would take people out of their screens for a second, show them stories that mirrored their own, showed them scars that mirrored their own, said, hey, we know your life is hard, but it can still be beautiful in the midst of your treatment plan, in the midst of your diagnosis. Like, you can still live a beautiful life. It does not have to be an excuse to kind of just stay inside and like, well, that was the story, the end, right? You can still do something amazing. So that was the first issue. This is the second one. And
What I
I'm
think
working
is
on the third one.
beautiful about the way you have decided to frame Bonus Day. Typically, a transplant magazine is the ones that I've seen talk a lot about the disease and the processes and the pokes and the prods and the procedures to get you there. And it's, they're real. They're part of our story too.
Mhm.
But your stories are like a paragraph on, I had this, I had this, I had that. And then this is what I've done with my life since.
Right.
And it's really about the after transplant, not the
Yes.
listing, not the waiting. There's a little bit of that,
Mhm.
but it's about and then, and
Mhm.
then.
Right.
And this is something that I resonate with immensely. I was in service to the HCM community since 95, 96. And a lot of people worried that when I got a transplant, I would leave the HCM community and just do transplant work. I'm like, no, I'm still HCM all the time. So, but what have I done since my transplant? Well, if you're listening to this podcast came about after my transplant. If you've watched a webinar, those were all post-transplant, Lisa. We've grown the organization from one full-time employee and 3 part-time employees to 11 full-time employees.
Mhm.
And that means more ability for us to serve the community and do more work. At the time of transplant, I think we were at like 40 centers of excellence. We're 56 now. And I wouldn't have been able to do any of that without the gift of an organ.
Right. I mean,
So we're all,
what you've done, Lisa, is you've left the light on, right? You've left the light on for the people that are going to come behind you, right? And that is the most beautiful thing somebody can do and say, like, I've been through this really experience. And instead of saying, I'm going to be angry, I'm going to be so furious that this has happened to me, that happened to my family, and I'm going to, are there parts of you that are angry? Of course, there's parts of me that are angry, but like
oh,
it, right? The joy of being here and the gratitude overshadows all of that. And I am just wanting to make sure that I can create a space, just like you, that can make this a little bit easier for anybody that's coming in behind us. And I think, I mean, I would have loved that. I mean, I was diagnosed just like you in the 90s, no internet, no Facebook groups to join. There's all of my friends were 13 and 14-year-olds. They were concerned about tests and homework, right? So like I was dealing with, I literally just watched my mom die and I had the same heart as her. Like I was always like outsider. I didn't know how to relate to anybody my own age. And I think that I can give, like, these pages are full of like vibrant people that have been through hard things, but like, you know, it's relatable. It's like, if, and for me, it's healing for me to work on, because I'm like, if these like amazing, beautiful people can do it, I can too. Because every day's not easy for me.
no, they're not. The other thing I love about the stories you're telling, we've got young people,
Mhm.
middle-aged people, later in life people. We've
Mhm.
got people from every socioeconomic possibility, ethnicity, color. Like we're all human,
Right.
and we're all living our own struggles and our own, you know, there's these moments of success, and we can celebrate them and not be disrespectful to others who are still in the battle. There's a part of me that feels a little bit guilty about surviving HCM,
Mhm.
because I now know I know what it's like to be obstructed. I know what it's like to be non-obstructed, and I know what it's like to have a normal heart too. And I so much value a normal heart or a healthy heart, my brandy heart, um, and I respect that. And I feel bad that I can't like give that to everybody else. Like, oh, I got out. You can too. About 5% of those with HCM will go to transplant. And I think that number might grow a little bit. And then I think it's going to decrease again because of all the new medications and all the new therapies. But for now, there's going to be, about 5% of us that need to go through this journey, and they need to know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And bonus day is an excellent way of seeing life past your disease state. And it's not just heart transplants. You've got kidneys and liver and intestines and what else you got?
So right now we're doing double lung. I believe the cover of the third issue is going to be a double lung transplant of 12 years survivorship. I can't even tell you. I'm so excited to put his story out there. I had the best time talking to him. His name is Calvin. I flew to Atlanta to tell that story. From Atlanta, I flew to Oklahoma to tell a story of a very young family who had 3 children. The third needed a lung transplant a day before their 1-year birthday, received a lung transplant one day before their first birthday. I'm also telling a story of a heart transplant patient. And because we got our hearts, always. Yeah, always, and then I have a liver transplant that I'm flying to South Carolina to tell his story. And you know what? It doesn't matter how we got to transplant, what organ it is. And truly, even if you had, like, when you're in this community of chronic illness and transplant, we all understand the celebration of each day and also like the struggle, right? We all share. I've been reading all these people's stories and talking to all these different people, and we all share the same. It doesn't matter where we came from. We all share the same anxieties and the same hopes and the same like goals, and like it's a beautiful thing. I don't know. I just love working on it so much, and I think that my goal has been to create it in a beautiful way that even if these things didn't apply to you, you'd still be like, oh, I want to pick that up and read it. So
photography is
Thanks.
You are a gifted photographer. The photos are gorgeous. The way that you show the lived experience of living a bonus day,
right?
Just really think about those words, listeners. Bonus day. Okay. Mm-hmm. We all have days, but in the transplant world, every time we wake up, it's a bonus. I probably would have lived another upwards of a year. It would have been a very uncomfortable year. But I probably could have survived with my old heart, affectionately called the bitch because she tried to kill me. We have a love-hate relationship. But I would be dead. Mm-hmm. I would be gone. I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of amazing things that I've done post-transplant. So every day is a bonus.
Right. And the thing is, exactly. And here's the thing, you can't just be thankful for the days that you were able to accomplish so many things. I'm also grateful for the days I can't get off the couch.
Yeah, my type A personality does not do
there. Well, I mean, like, you know what I mean? But like, you can't, like, it's just, you have to be grateful for all of it because it's all living, the good and the bad. You're alive. And I think that's the most amazing part. And that I always think about the movie It's a Wonderful Life and how he sees his life, what it would look like if he wasn't here. I mean, that's what my life feels like right now. Like every interaction, I shouldn't be here to interact with whoever I'm interacting with. So like, let's make their day better. Let's like make it freaking amazing. Like, let's just have fun. Because like, really, what's stressful at this point? Like, what are we stressed about?
I think that is an excellent point. And we can, pre-transplant, post-transplant, doesn't matter. We can look at the world and tell you every single thing that's wrong by our point of view.
Of course.
Yeah. Right? You can go down rabbit holes of being negative. Mm-hmm. I get pissy about things, not gonna lie. I'm human. Like I don't love everything. But when you start getting in those modes, at least me, I just realized I'm like, oh, I'm going down that rabbit hole and I'm not even supposed to be here. So let's flip this one on its head and look at what I have, not what I don't have, or what's right, not what's wrong. So one of the things we do here at the office is occasionally we'll talk about what went right today. Like what went right?
Yep.
because I can tell you all the little petty things like that could have been better, that could have been better, that could have been better. But what went right? Like I
Right.
got the podcast with Allison today and Dr. Mazur today. I got to do these things today and I get to share these stories and I get to elevate these voices. And I love that.
Right.
I love your project. We were your first advertiser.
I
Super proud of that.
know. I know.
And we're going to keep that going and we're going
Thank
to
you.
keep disseminating your beautiful work to our centers and hopefully get them to see there's value here and that they will hopefully get involved and buy more and sell more and get it out there so people can see it. And if you want a copy of Bonus Day, drop me an
Mhm.
email at the HCMA, support at 4hcm.org, and say, I'd love a copy of Bonus Day. And we'll send it to you.
Yeah.
We want
Thank
to
you.
get
I know. Yeah, your support has been so monumental in all of this, and I just think I'm so lucky to be here to be able to work on it. Yeah.
I think the world, the universe. I'm not a religious person. We all know this, but I
Same.
am a
Yep.
spiritual one, and I do believe that the universe puts us where we need to be. And you are using your gift in such a unique way that it has to succeed because it's beautiful work. And there's something, digital's great.
Mhm.
We all love digital. But to
Yep.
have a magazine in your hand as you're in a hospital and you're thinking about, can I do this? Do other people do this? Am I
Mhm.
like them? And when you're reading other people's stories, no matter what the organ is, they've been through
Right.
shit. We've been through shit.
Mhm.
We survived. We're here to bring them forward and then let their stories shine so that they can be an inspiration to those around them. And if we haven't said this already, I am remiss. If you have not let your family know about your wishes regarding organ donation, this is your time. Let your family know I would be willing to give in the event that my life is going to end. We would need donor families to understand their power in all of this. And if you have not signed the back of your driver's license and said, yes, I'll be an organ donor, take a moment right now to go do that. Sign up to be an organ donor. You will be somebody's hero. You can be that moment of light in darkness. And we encourage everybody to give what they can when it's right.
Mhm. Right. 100%.
Mm.
Yeah. It's just, oh, how do you even follow that up? That's amazing. But yeah, I mean, it's so true. You know.
Be a donor, be a hero. And, there's some people spread misinformation about the donor
Mhm.
process.
Right.
And having been on that side, my sister couldn't survive. Her brain was damaged too much. And had she had ever woken up, she wouldn't have been who she was. She wouldn't have been able to function on her own. And that's not what she wanted out of life. So let your family know how far you're willing to go with medical intervention to save your life. And when your life can't be saved, you could be the difference between somebody like Allison being able to be here with her family and live a productive life versus having to wait in the hospital for another year waiting for a heart. And that does happen. So be a donor, be a hero. Don't take your organs to heaven. Heaven knows we need some here. Whatever line works for you, please let your family know your choices.
Right.
Okay, Allison, this has been fantastic. I'm sure we're going to talk again. Actually, we'll talk again after we share my story, which is like, I don't do that very often. I don't share my story outside of HCMA. And I'm like, okay, I'll let you know when I'm ready. And I'm ready.
I
So
know. I'm so excited for it.
I will be in an upcoming edition of Bonus Day, and we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of those. And hopefully, we can have Allison come on out to our annual meeting in October in New Jersey and talk about Bonus Day and let you all see the beautiful work that she's done and she continues to do. Are we still doing wedding photography?
We are still doing wedding photography. Yep.
So if you need an awesome wedding photographer,
Yeah.
reach out to this Pennsylvania girl and see what can be done.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Allison, thank you so much for joining us on Tales from the Heart. It's been absolutely lovely spending this time with you. And I am inspired by everything that you're doing and your lived experience. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable and sharing it with us.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. And, thank you for everything you've done for all of us. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Take care and join us next time on Tales from the Heart, and you'll learn more amazing stories about amazing patients and families living with HCM and beyond.